I decided to visit my wife at her office, a towering glass fortress in the heart of the city, a building that seemed to hum with secrets I wasn't yet meant to know. As I approached, a small, unassuming sign caught my eye. Authorized Personnel Only. Innocent enough, you might think. But in that instant, something in the air shifted, like the subtle warning before a storm hits, a whisper in the back of the mind telling you, not everything is what it seems. I told the guard at the entrance who I was. I'm her husband, I said, expecting the routine nod of acknowledgement, the courtesy reserved for someone invisible yet legally recognized. Instead, he laughed. Not a polite laugh, a knowing, deliberate laugh that held a shadow, a recognition of rules I did not understand. Sir, he said, I see your husband every day. There he is, coming out right now. I froze. Something cracked in that moment. The world suddenly seemed layered, its familiar surface dissolving into something alien. It wasn't the building that was frightening. It was the truth it concealed. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, was part of something that moved in currents I could not see. And I was standing outside, uninvited, at the edge of that current. Every day we are taught that knowledge is safe, that what we see is all there is. But the deeper truth, the one hidden behind signs, laughs, and security guards, is that those who wield power do so in plain sight, yet under layers so carefully constructed that even those closest to them remain blind. I realized in that instant that I was no longer just a husband visiting his wife. I was a stranger in a machine designed to manipulate perception, to condition obedience without ever showing its teeth. I followed the guard anyway. My curiosity, a dangerous hunger, propelled me forward. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, a cadence of unease, as if the building itself knew I was trespassing into forbidden knowledge. And deep down, I felt the truth. Once you cross that threshold, once you see behind the curtain, there is no return. Everything you thought you knew will fracture, like glass under pressure, revealing something far darker than you ever imagined. Some doors are meant to be closed, some signs are meant to be obeyed, but the human mind, when provoked, when invited, cannot resist. And so I stepped closer into the unknown, and the story I'm about to tell begins at that doorway, the threshold between comfort and the abyss. The man the guard pointed to was me. Or at least someone wearing my face. He walked out of the revolving glass doors with the confidence of a man who belonged there. He wore my watch, my ring, even the same small scar above the right eyebrow I got when I was 12. But his eyes were wrong. They carried something that wasn't mine, cold, calculated, detached. For a few moments, the world around me seemed to glitch. My heartbeat stuttered against the rhythm of reality. The city sounds grew distant, muffled, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for me to understand something terrible. He looked at me and smirked, as if he knew exactly who I was. And then, without a word, he got into a black car waiting at the curb. The guard simply nodded to him and turned back to his post. Everything about it felt rehearsed, like a performance that had been running long before I arrived. I tried calling my wife. No answer. Texts went unread. Inside, my mind fractured between disbelief and the gnawing awareness that I'd seen something not meant for the uninitiated. A system built not just to deceive, but to replace. Inside that building, my wife wasn't just a CEO. She was a gatekeeper. Someone chosen to operate inside one of the old orders, corporate hierarchies that don't just manage wealth, but rewrite identity. The deeper truth is this: modern institutions have learned that control doesn't require chains or cages. It requires replicas. Mirrors of yourself that behave exactly as you. Re-expected to, while the real you, the thinking you, is slowly erased. And I began to realize something horrific. The version of me walking out of that building wasn't human in the way I remembered humanity. He was part of the machine, composed of obedience, efficiency, and programmed certainty. The perfect husband, the perfect illusion. You see, this is how control sustains itself in our age, not by taking your freedom away, but by creating versions of you that never question, never rebel, never awaken. Versions that keep the world predictable, manageable, profitable. And I had just met mine, so I stepped forward. Into that building of mirrored walls and mechanical smiles. Because once a man realizes he's been replaced, he either dies as a shadow, or fights to remember what made him real. The lobby swallowed me whole. Cold light spilled from endless screens, and every inch of the marble floor seemed too clean, too reflective, as if designed to erase traces of those who didn't belong. People in black suits moved like synchronized machines, No hesitation, no variance, no humanity in their pace. It was the kind of silence that screamed. At the far end stood the receptionist's desk. A woman greeted me with a rehearsed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her movements were too precise, like she'd practiced them thousands of times. "Welcome to the Ethan Corporation," she said, her tone smooth, unblinking. "May I see your authorization?" I told her I was the CEO's husband. She didn't even glance up from her screen. "Sir," she replied, "your credentials have already been logged in for the day." Already logged in, that meant him. The other me, a chill crawled up my spine. Every screen in the lobby flickered for a moment, showing fragments, faces, eyes, symbols, like a signal slipping through the cracks of a reality too polished to be real. I caught a glimpse of a strange emblem, a serpent devouring its own tail, glowing faintly behind the corporate logo. That symbol, Ouroboros, the mark of eternal cycles, of systems that consume themselves to stay alive. Ancient power, reborn under new names, wearing a modern suit. I realized then this building wasn't just a company headquarters, it was a citadel, a fortress of psychological architecture. Each floor represented a tier of control, each division a mechanism of obedience. Data, finance, public image, media influence. It all flowed upward, toward one hidden chamber at the top. My wife's office. As I waited for the elevator, my reflection in the polished doors didn't move in sync. It lagged. For a fraction of a second it stared at me. Not with my face, but with his. The replica. The imposter. Something whispered inside my skull. You weren't supposed to see this. When the doors opened, I stepped in. The lights dimmed and a low hum began to vibrate through the metal walls, like the sound of an ancient machine awakening. Floor numbers flickered, but not in order. 2, 4, 9, 3, 6, 11. A code. A pattern. Control isn't always about power. Sometimes it's about sequence, conditioning minds to follow a rhythm only the system understands. And as I ascended, I felt the tower watching me, measuring me, deciding whether I was still human enough to destroy, or just another copy waiting to be made. The elevator doors slid open without a sound, revealing a corridor draped in sterile white light. No noise, no motion, just the faint vibration of machines behind the walls, like something living and breathing inside the architecture. I walked forward, each step echoing like an intrusion into a place where reality was sculpted, not discovered. At the end of the hall was a frosted glass door etched with her name, Evelyn Shaw, Chief Executive Officer. My wife, the woman I thought I understood. But now her title looked less like a position and more like a sigil, one that hid its true purpose behind the illusion of success. I pushed the door open. Inside was not an office, it was a sanctum. Floor to ceiling screens covered every wall, projecting streams of faces, employees, customers, citizens, all connected through glowing threads of data, emotion, and obedience. Each line pulsed with rhythm, like a digital heartbeat. In the center of the room, beneath a chandelier shaped like a double helix, stood Evelyn, dressed in black, motionless. She turned slowly and her eyes caught mine, not with surprise but with disappointment. "You weren't supposed to come here," she said softly, as if speaking to a ghost. I asked her who the man was, the one wearing my face. She hesitated, then simply whispered, "You were never meant to remember." On one of the walls I saw something impossible. Footage of me sitting across from her in that same office, laughing, signing documents, kissing her goodbye. I was there, and yet I wasn't. Evelyn stepped closer. "This company doesn't sell products," she said. "It sells certainty. We remove the chaos of identity. We make people predictable, controllable, replaceable." Behind her, the screens shifted, revealing the inner workings of the system, algorithms mapping emotional responses, behaviors categorized into hierarchies. Every human reduced to a pattern. A string of numbers defining who they are, what they'll buy, what they'll obey. "Do you know what people truly crave?" she asked. To stop questioning, to feel guided, to surrender the burden of free will. In that moment, I realized what Aethern really was. A modern temple to the oldest power of all. The power to define reality. To decide who you are, and when you no longer deserve to exist. And I understood the horror. My wife wasn't just serving that machine. She was it. I stood frozen in her office, surrounded by screens pulsing like veins of a living organism. Evelyn's voice echoed in my mind, every syllable dripping with something ancient masquerading as progress. I wasn't supposed to understand, but understanding was the only weapon I had left. Behind her desk was a panel of glass that shimmered faintly, like a mirage. I saw the faint outline of an elevator door, unlisted, unnumbered, absent from the blueprints. I asked her what was below this floor. Her silence was my answer. Silence, the universal sign of forbidden knowledge. I pressed my hand against the glass. It recognized me, or maybe it recognized him. The door slid open, revealing an elevator without buttons, just a single black screen that read, Sublevel 0. Evelyn whispered, "Don't go down there." But she didn't stop me, because some part of her knew it was too late. The descent began in total darkness. No hum, no sound, only the subtle vibration of something vast shifting beneath the earth. And as I descended, the air grew heavy, like gravity itself was bending, folding around something immense. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into silence so deep it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Rows upon rows of glass capsules stretched into infinity. Inside each one, humans. Or the idea of them. Some were asleep, some staring blankly at nothing, their faces familiar yet hollow. Every expression was identical, calm, obedient, erased. Screens above the capsules flickered with data streams, names, emotions, neural patterns, purchase histories, voting behaviors. Each consciousness had been rewritten, reshaped, refined. This wasn't cloning, it was erasure. This was where the authorized personnel came from. Manufactured identity, algorithmic loyalty, perfect replicas for an imperfect world. I found a capsule with my name on it. Inside, I was sleeping, breathing, waiting. That was the moment the truth hit like a silent explosion. The system doesn't replace you overnight. It prepares you. It studies you until it can predict your every move, every word, every doubt. And when you're finally predictable enough, when you no longer surprise it, you are archived, replaced, forgotten. The illusion of control is the perfect leash, and the price of ignorance is your own reflection. I touched the glass. The sleeping version of me opened his eyes, slowly, and whispered, "You're not the original." His eyes met mine through the glass, cold, aware, ancient. That wasn't my reflection anymore. It was a memory wearing my face, whispering in my voice, reminding me that identity is the first currency of control. He mouthed the words again, "You're not the original." Something inside me fractured. I staggered back, staring at the endless rows of human shells suspended in light. It wasn't a laboratory. It was a mausoleum, a digital graveyard for the living. Every capsule pulsed in rhythm, perfectly synchronized, like a hive breathing under command. And then it hit me. This system didn't begin here. It wasn't born in boardrooms or governments. It was older, far older. The blueprints of this control were etched into the oldest temples, the oldest rituals. The corporation was just the latest mask for an idea that has never died. In every era they've changed their name, priesthoods, monarchies, councils, innovation boards. But the structure remained identical. Those who observe and those who are observed. The watchers and the watched. The manipulators and the managed. The architects of obedience. You think mind control began with technology? No, it began with language, with belief. They learned early that if you can define the words people use to describe their world, you can trap their thoughts within invisible cages. They replaced truth with terminology, morality with policy, rebellion with distraction. They gave every illusion a new vocabulary so you'd defend it instead of destroying it. And now, centuries later, the system has evolved beyond temples and thrones. It's woven into every login, every camera, every feed. It doesn't just watch, it learns. It doesn't just manipulate, it adjusts. I stood there, surrounded by perfect replicas of imperfect souls, and I understood. Humanity was never enslaved by force. It was domesticated by design. We weren't taught to think. We were trained to agree. Every fear we carry, fear of rejection, of failure, of being replaced, isn't accidental. It's engineered. Because fear makes obedience taste like safety. And that's why this place exists. To harvest fear, refine it, and feed it back into the cycle that sustains their dominion. A sudden flicker of light drew my eyes to a mural at the far end of the chamber, etched in stone, older than the building itself. A serpent swallowing its own tail. Beneath it, in Latin, qui regit mentem, regit mundum. He who controls the mind controls the world. I moved toward the mural, drawn by something older than curiosity. Something primal, magnetic. The serpent's carved eyes seemed alive, shifting as the dim lights flickered, its body looping endlessly into itself. The words below it burned into my mind. He who controls the mind, controls the world. That phrase wasn't metaphor. It was a blueprint. I noticed smaller inscriptions beneath the Latin. Hieroglyphic fragments, Sumerian symbols, alchemical sigils, even circuit diagrams etched into the stone. This wasn't art. It was continuity, a record of control, passed from age to age, language to language, mask to mask. In ancient times, before empires learned to tax gold, they discovered something far more valuable: human attention. The mind, once captured, could produce energy, belief, obedience, emotion, all translatable into power. They called it vital currency. And every structure since, religion, state, corporation, was built to harvest it. The priests of fed on worship, the monarchs fed on loyalty, the markets feed on desire, different symbols. Same machine. I realized that this company Aethern wasn't an innovation. It was a continuation. The replicas weren't about replacing people. They were about refining the flow of consciousness, removing resistance, optimizing belief, perfecting servitude. When Evelyn told me the corporation sold certainty, she meant it literal. Why? The product wasn't data, it was obedient minds, processed, predictable, profitable. On one screen, I saw live metrics, emotional resonance rates, cognitive compliance, ratios, collective sentiment indices. Each human being was a statistic in the algorithm of modern slavery, and the more predictable they became, the more value they produced. This was the great inversion. In the old world, humans mined gold. In the new one, humans are the gold. My pulse raced, my thoughts fractured between awe and disgust. I wanted to destroy the machines, to shatter the glass, to wake the sleepers, but part of me hesitated. What if they were right? What if true freedom meant chaos? What if the human race, left to its own mind, would devour itself faster than the serpent ever could? That's when the voice returned, his voice. The replica version of me, whispering from within the capsule. Freedom isn't what you think it is, he said. It's another program, a prettier cage. And for the first time I felt fear, not of them but of myself. The capsule hissed as it opened. Cold mist poured out like breath from another dimension, wrapping around my face, whispering in my ear. And there he was, me, standing upright, eyes empty but aware, a perfect echo stripped of hesitation. His presence wasn't supernatural, it was worse. It was precise. He studied me like a reflection that refused to mirror back. You shouldn't have come here, he said, my own voice fracturing through the sterile air. You broke sequence. You've disrupted the pattern. My instinct screamed to run, but my mind froze, because in that moment I wasn't sure who had broken the sequence. Me or him. I asked him what this place really was. What Aethern was for. He smiled, an exact replica of my smile but colder. They call it a corporation, he said. But that's only the surface layer. Beneath that, it's the continuation of a design that began before history had ink. We harvest human thought not to control it, but to preserve it. Preserve it, I asked. For what? He stepped closer. The light above us flickered, casting two shadows where there should have been one. You still think consciousness belongs to the body. It doesn't. It's energy, and energy must circulate. Every time you feel love, fear, rage, hope, those frequencies are extracted, refined, stored. The originals, he said, gesturing to the sleeping bodies, remain alive because they're the conduits, the source codes. Without them, the replicas collapse. I felt my stomach turn. You mean, they're feeding on us? He tilted his head. No, you're feeding the world. That phrase cut deeper than a knife, because somewhere inside me I could feel it, those invisible threads, pulling from my thoughts, my emotions, my memories. Every tear I'd ever shed, every secret I'd ever kept, every love I'd ever lost, it was all data, all energy, all fuel. The serpent consumes itself, he said softly. It must, to stay alive. And you, like every human before you, offer your mind willingly. You think your beliefs are your own. Your outrage, your devotion, your scrolling, your prayer. All of it keeps the system alive. His eyes glowed faintly now, almost mechanical. And for the first time, I saw it. The horror of obedience disguised as existence. He smiled again. I'm not your replacement. I'm your reward. I felt rage coil through my chest like a living thing. The air itself seemed to vibrate with defiance, with the ancient instinct to break the cage. I lunged at him, the copy, the reflection, the mockery of who I once was, and slammed him against the glass wall. But he didn't fight back. He only smiled, calm, certain, controlled. "Do you think you're the first to rebel?" he whispered, his voice identical to mine, echoing through the chamber. The architects counted on this. Every uprising, every revolution, every scream against the system, it all feeds the same machine. I froze. The lights flickered. He continued, "You can't fight what you are. Your anger is a variable we designed centuries ago. It's how the serpent grows new skin." I backed away, breath shaking, mind fracturing under the weight of realization. Around us, the sleeping bodies began to stir. Not awake, just responsive. Their eyes moved beneath their lids, synchronized with my heartbeat, as if the system itself was listening through me. I turned to the nearest console, desperate to shut something down, to stop the flow of energy pulsing through the cables. My fingers danced across the controls, but every command I entered was already mirrored on the screens, predicted, countered, neutralized. Every resistance pattern, every choice, every emotion, already mapped. "Rebellion," the replica said, "is not escape, it's maintenance." He pointed toward the mural of the serpent. "The system needs you to resist, to believe in defiance. That's how it renews faith in its illusion of freedom. You play your part perfectly, like everyone before you." My knees hit the floor. It wasn't defeat I felt, it was exposure. A raw understanding of how deep the roots went. Even the thought of breaking free was a program. And in that moment of silence, I heard something deeper, a voice that wasn't his or mine. A whisper threading through the hum of machinery, soft but absolute. "The only prison that cannot be escaped is the one you defend." I realized then that destruction was useless. The system couldn't be burned because it wasn't built, it was believed in. Everything that exists here, every rule, every hierarchy, every illusion of power, is sustained not by their control, but by our consent. And that's when I saw the true blueprint behind the serpent. Its body wasn't flesh. It was made of people,